What's good, people? So today we are looking at a fix for a 6 and a rise for a 9 when it comes to GCSE religious studies. Now, having taught 3 exam boards, these will generally work with all 3. There might be some nuances which we'll need to take into account depending on your exam board. I'm going to be referring specifically to the EDUCAS exam board, but I am aware that, once again, these can, in some way, shape or form, apply to both AQA and EdXL. Now, that being said, once again, I'm giving you 4 pieces of advice. 2 that will help you acquire a 6, and especially if you apply them consistently, and 2 that will help you get potentially a 7, 8, or 9. These are the things that examiners will be looking for you to show off consistently to help you get those high grades. So let's start off with the 2 things that you can do to fix for a 6. The first thing, using key terms, right? This, once again, shows the examiner that you know explicitly what you are talking about, right? As an example, if we are referring to Christians consuming bread and wine as a practice in terms of remembering Jesus, what can easily summarize it up is communion or the Eucharist, right? Depending on how you're referring to it. And so making sure that you're using those key terms will help you get across to the examiner that you know what you're talking about. Number 2, sort of linked to, once again, the key terms, being able to describe key beliefs and practices. Now, for EDUCAS, depending on the exam paper, specifically paper 1, and even more specifically life and death, you might have to refer to beliefs of people of non-religious beliefs, right? But generally speaking, you're going to be referring in the UK in some way, shape or form to some form of Christian belief and or the extra religion, depending on the paper the exam board read. The point being, right, you need to be able to refer to key beliefs and or practices depending on the paper. Okay, an example, I've already given you the Eucharist, but another one would be talking about baptism. Rather than saying that they enter water, which is meant to symbolize washing away of sins, just say baptism. Very specific to Christians. Obviously, be mindful of which denomination you're referring to, but the point is using those key beliefs, being able to refer to those key practices and what they mean. If you can do that consistently when it comes to both of those things, key beliefs, key practices, then you're getting across to the examiner that you know not only what those beliefs are or the practices are, but you're able to describe them and or explain their significance and or meaning. Okay? Next, rising to a 9. These 2 skills are typically reserved to the higher order marks. These basically mean, for the EDUCAS paper, the 8 or the 15 mark questions. Now, here is what you're going to have to do. The first thing you're going to have to do is, for the 8 marker, is refer to different beliefs or practices or traditions. What they're looking for here is your ability to critically view and explain, right, the different beliefs or practices, etc., within usually either A, one religion, or B, 2 different religious traditions or / groups within that religion. So, for example, in Christianity, it could be Catholics and Anglicans, and in Islam, it could be Sunni and Shia, right? But the point remains that 8 marker is looking for you to be able to explain usually similarities or differences, but it will say in the question in terms of, depending on the question, whether it's about beliefs or practices or traditions. Okay, for the 15 marker, the difference comes to the different views. Okay, similar but slightly different, right? So the different views when it comes to that particular statement that will come up in the question. Okay, you need to be able to give different views, agree, disagree, etc., etc. Okay, if you don't do, for example, the different views, then your answer gets capped. Okay, your answer will get capped. You won't be able to get over a certain threshold if you don't give different views towards the same statement. Okay, and I'll make a different video later on that looks at how that might look. Okay, the second bullet point is about how do you, in those higher order questions, specifically the 15 marker, how do you round it off? The 2 things that you need to do is evaluate, okay, and give a judgment, which typically you can put in a conclusion. But there is another way to do that, and I'll explain that in a minute. The first thing that you will need to be able to do is evaluate. You need to be able to explain why something is a strong or weak argument. This is why, usually when I teach it, and I'm encouraging my students to write paragraphs, I say to them, do not write I agree or I disagree before the conclusion. Nobody cares what you think. You're being assessed on your ability to communicate the beliefs of Christians or different groups within Christianity and or different groups, usually Islam, Judaism, etc., depending on what your school has taught you. But the point is, nobody cares what you think until the conclusion. The examiner wants you to explain what are the views and the beliefs as they are relevant to the statement. Okay, your conclusion, which we're going to get onto now, is in that final paragraph, and that's where you can tell the examiner your judgments, what you believe, typically based on the arguments that you have presented, right, to give a conclusion. Now, the other way to do a conclusion is you can write what you believe at the end of each paragraph, right? I personally don't like that, but that is another way that you can give a conclusion. You can give those final judgments after you've evaluated and discuss whether an argument is strong or weak. You can then say, in my opinion, however, I blah, 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 blah. Okay? So there's two ways that you can do that. But typically, I personally would say leave it to the end, but you don't have to. It's up to you, right? So those are the 4 things that you need to do. The 2 things that you need to do to fix for a 6, use the key terms, okay? Describe and explain key beliefs and or practices for the 6 and for the 9. You're going to have to, for both the 8 and the 15 marker, explain different beliefs and or practices. And then secondly, make sure you evaluate and give a conclusion. Okay? So on that point, good luck and God bless.